Hello, welcome to another Tales of Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. And my camera, uy, oy vey. Today's tale is a continuation of one that we started before. This is part two of The Rats in the Walls. So grab your blankies, grab your snackies. This is going to be around 7 to 8 pages long, so it's kind of be a okay sized one, but prepare. The Rats in the Wall, Part 2. I retired early, being very sleepy, but was harassed by dreams of the most horrible sort. I seemed to be looking down from an immense height upon a twilight grotto, knee deep with filth, where a white bearded Damon swineherd drove about with his staff a flock of fungus, flabby beasts whose appearance filled me with utterable loathing. Then, as the swineherd paused and nodded over his task, a mighty swarm of rats rained down on the stinking abyss and fell to devouring beasts and man alike. From this terrific vision, I was abruptly awakened by the motions of my cat, who had been sleeping as usual across my feet. This time, I did not have to question the source of his snarls and hisses, and of the fear which made him sink his claws into my ankle, unconscious of their effect. For on every side of the chamber the walls were alive with nauseous sound and verminous slithering of ravenous gigantic rats. There was now no Aurora to shrew the state of the rat Aras, the fallen section of which had been replaced, but I was not too frightened to switch on the light. As the bulbs leapt into radiance, I saw a hideous shaking all over the tapestry, causing the somewhat peculiar designs to execute a singular dance of death. This motion disappeared almost at once, and the sound with it, springing out of the bed. I poked at the Ars with the long handle of a warming pan that rested near, and lifted one section to see what lay beneath. There was nothing but the patched stone wall, and even the cat had lost his tense realization of abnormal presence. When I examined the circular trap that had been placed in the room, I found all of the openings sprung, though no trace remained of what had been caught and had escaped. Further sleep was out of question, so lighting a candle, I opened the door and went out of the gallery towards the stairs to my study, the cat following at my heels. Before we had reached the stone steps, however, the cat darted ahead of me and vanished down the ancient flight. As I descended the stairs myself, I became suddenly aware of sounds in the great room below, sounds of a nature which could not be mistaken. The oak paneled walls were alive with rats, scampering and milling, whilst the cat was racing about with the fury of a baffled hunter. Reaching the bottom, I switched on the light, which did not this time cause the noise to subside. The rats continued their riot, stampeding with such force and distinctness that I could finally assign to their motions a definite direction. These creatures, in numbers apparently inexhaustible, were engulfed in one stupendous migration from inconceivable heights to some depths unconceivably or inconceivably below. I now heard steps in the corridor, and in another moment, two servants pushed open the massive door. They were searching the house. They were searching the house for some unknown source of disturbance which had thrown all the cats into a snarling panic and caused them to plunge precipitately down several flights of stairs and squat, yowling, before the closed door to the subcellar. I asked them if they had heard the rats, but they replied in a negative. And when I turned to call their attention to the sounds in the panels, I realized that the noise had ceased. With the two men, I went down to the door of the subcellar, but found the cats already dispersed. Later, I resolved to explore the crypt below, but for the present I merely made a round of traps. All were sprung, yet all were tenantless. Satisfying myself that no one had heard the rats save the felines and me, I sat in my study till morning, thinking profoundly and recalling every scrap of legend I had unearthed concerning the building I inhabited. I slept some in the forenoon, leaning back in the one comfortable library chair which my medieval plan of furnishing could not banish. Later, I telephoned to Captain Norris, who came over and helped me explore the subcellar. Absolutely nothing untoward was found, although we could not repress a thrill at the knowledge that the vault was built by Roman hands. Every low arch and massive pillar was Roman, not the debased Romanesque of the building Saxons, but the severe and harmonious classicis- classicism of the age of the Caesars. Indeed, the walls abounded with inscription familiar to the antiquarians who had repeatedly explored the place. Things like P. Getai, Prop, Temp, Dona, and Le Bracte, Vers Prontifi, Antis. The reference to Antis made me shiver, for I had read Catullus and knew something of the hideous rites of the Eastern god, whose worship was so mixed with that of Cybele. Norris and I, by the light of lanterns, tried to interpret the odd and nearly effaced designs on certain irregularly rectangular blocks of stone generally held by the altars. Held to be altars, but could not make nothing of them. We remembered that one pattern, a sort of rayed sun, was held by students to imply a non Roman origin, suggesting that these altars had merely been adopted by the Roman priest from some older and perhaps aboriginal temple on the same site. On one of these blocks were some brown stains which made me wonder. The largest, in the center of the room, had certain features on the upper surface which indicated its connection with fire. Probably burnt offerings. Such were the sights in that crypt before the whose door the cats had howled, and where Norris and I now determined to pass the night. Couches were brought down by the servants, who were told not to mind any nocturnal actions of the cats. And my cat was admitted as much for help as for companionship. We decided to keep the great oak doors, a modern reproduction with slits of ventilation, tightly closed, and with this attended to and retired with lanterns still burning to await whatever might occur. The vault was very deep in the foundations of the priory, and undoubtedly far down on the face of the beetling limestone cliff overlooking the waste valley. That it had been the goal of the scuffling and unexplainable rats I could not doubt, though why I could not tell. As we lay there unexpectedly, I found my vigil occasionally mixed with half formed dreams from which the uneasy motions of the cat across my feet would rouse me. These dreams were not wholesome, but horribly like the one I had had the night before. I saw again the twilit grotto and the swineherd with his unmentionable fungus beast wallowing in filth. And as I looked at these things, they seemed nearer and more distinct, so distinct that I could almost observe their features. Then I did not observe the flabby features of one of them and awakened with such a scream that my cat startled up, whilst Captain Norris, who had not slept, laughed considerably. Norris might have laughed more, or perhaps less, had he known what it was that made me scream. But I did not remember myself till later. Ultimate horror often paralyzes memory in a merciful way. Norris waked me when the phenomena began. Out of the same frightful dream, I was called by his gentle shaking and his urging to listen to the cats. Indeed, there was much to listen to, for beyond the closed door, at the head of the stone steps, was a venerable nightmare of feline yelling and clawing, whilst my cat, unmindful of his kindred outside, was running excitedly around the bare stone walls, in which I heard the same babble of scurrying rats that troubled me the night before. An acute terror now rose within me, for here were anomalies which nothing normal could well explain. These rats, if not the creatures of a madness which I shared with the cats alone, must be burrowing and sliding in Roman walls I had thought to be of solid limestone blocks, unless perhaps the action of water through more than 17 centuries had eaten winded, winding tunnels which rodent bodies had worn clear and ample. But even so, the spectral horror was no less. For if these were living vermin, why did not Norris hear their disgusting commotion? Why did he urge me to watch my cat and listen to the cats outside? And why did he guess wildly and vaguely at what could have aroused them? By the time I had managed to tell him, as rationally as I could, what I thought I was hearing, my ears gave me the last fading impression of the scurrying, which had retreated still downward, far beneath this deepest of subcellars, till it seemed as if the whole cliff below were riddled with questing rats. Norris was not as susceptible as I had anticipated, but instead seemed profoundly moved. He motioned to me to notice that the cat at the door had ceased their clamor, as if giving up the rats for lost, whilst my cat had a burst of renewed restlessness and was clawing frantically around the bottom of the large stone altar in the center of the room, which was nearer Nori's couch than mine. My fear of the unknown was at this point very great. Something astounding had occurred. And I saw that Captain Norris, a younger, stouter, more presumably more naturally materialistic man, was affected fully as much as myself. Perhaps because of his lifelong and intimate familiarity with local legend. We could, for the moment, do nothing but watch the old black cat as he pawed with decreasing fervor at the base of the altar, occasionally looking up and mewing at me in that persuasive manner which he used when he wished me to perform some favor for him. Norris now took a lantern close to the altar and examined the place where my cat was pawing, silently kneeling and scraping away the lynchings of the centuries which joined the massive pre Roman block to the tessellated floor. He did not find anything, and was about to abandon his efforts when I noticed a trivial circumstance which made me shudder, even though it implied nothing more than I had already imagined. I told him of it, and we both looked at its almost imperceptible manifestation with the fixedness of fascinated discovery and acknowledgement. It was only this, that the flame of the lantern set down near the altar was slightly but certainly flickering from a draught of air which it had not been before received, and which came from a draught of air which it had not before received, and which came indubitably from the crevices between floor and altar where Norris was scraping away the lynchings. We spent the rest of the night in a brilliantly lighted study, nervously discussing what we should do next. The discovery that some vault deeper than the deepest known masonry of the Romans underlay this accursed pile, some vault unsuspected by the curious antiquarians of 3 centuries, would have been sufficient to excite us without any background of the sinister. As it was, the fascination became twofold, and we paused in doubt whether to abandon our search and quit the priory for ever in suspicion cautious forever in some suspicious caution, or to gratify our sense of adventure and brave whatever horrors might await us in the unknown depths. By morning, we had compromised and decided to go to London to gather a group of archaeologists and scientific men fit to cope with the mystery. It should be mentioned that before leaving the subcellar, we had vainly tried to move the central altar, which we now recognized as the gate to a new pit of nameless fear. What secret would open the gate? Wiser men than we would have to find. During many days in London, Captain Norris and I presented our facts, conjectures, and legendary anecdotes to 5 eminent authorities, all men who could be trusted to respect any family disclosures which future explorations might develop. We found most of them little disposed to scoff, but instead intensely interested and sincerely sympathetic. It was hardly necessary to name them all, but I may say that they included Sir William Brinton, whose excavations in the Troad excited most of the world in their day. As we all took the train for Chester, I felt myself poised on the brink of frightful revelations, a sensation symbolized by the air of mourning among the many Americans at the unexpected death of the president on the other side of the world. On the evening of August 7th, we reached Exham Priory, where the servants assured me that nothing unusual had occurred. The cats, even my old cat, had been perfectly placid, and not a trap in the house had been sprung. We were to begin exploring on the following day, awaiting which I assigned well appointed rooms to all my guests. I myself retired in my own two chambers, with my cat across my feet. Sleep came quickly, but hideous dreams assailed me. There was a vision of a Roman feast, like that of Trimalchio, with a horror in a covered platter. Then came that damnable recurrent thing about the swineherd and his filthy drove in the twilit grotto. Yet, when I awoke, it was full daylight, with normal sounds in the house below. The rats, living or spectral, had not troubled me, and my cat was still quietly asleep. On going down, I found that the same tranquillity had prevailed elsewhere, a condition which one of the assembled servants, a fellow named Thornton, devoted to the psychics, rather absurdly laid to the fact that I had now been shewn the thing which certain forces had wished to shew me. All was now ready, and at 11 a.m., our entire group of 7 men, bearing powerful electric searchlights and implements of excavation, went down to the subcellar and bolted the door behind us. My cat was with us, for the investigators found no occasion to despise his excitability, and were indeed anxious that he be present in case of obscure rodent manifestations. We noted the Roman inscriptions and unknown altar design only briefly, for three of the savants had already seen them, and all knew their characteristics. Prime attention had paid to the momentous central altar, and within an hour Sir William Brinton had caused it to tilt backward, balanced by some unknown species of counterweight. There now lay revealed such a horror as would have overwhelmed us had we not been prepared. Through a nearly square opening in the tiled floor, sprawling on a flight of stone steps so prodigiously worn that it was little more than an inclined plane at the center, was a ghastly array of human or semi human bone. Those which retained their collocation as skeletons strewn altitudes of panic fear, and over all were the marks of rodent gnawing. The skulls denoted nothing short of utter idiocy, cretinism, or primitive semi-apedom. Above the hellishly littered steps arched a descending passage seemingly chiseled from the solid rock, and conducting a current of air. This current was not a sudden or noxious rush, as from a closed vault, but a cool breeze with something of freshness in it. We did not pause long, but shiveringly began to clear a passage down the steps. It was then that Sir William, examining the hewn walls, made the odd observation that the passage, according to the direction of the strokes, must have been chiseled from beneath. I must be deliberate now and choose my words. After plowing down a few steps amidst the gnawed bones, we saw that there was light ahead, not any mystic phosphorescence, but a filtered daylight which could not come except from unknown fissures in the cliffs that overlooked the waste valley. That with such fissures had escaped notice from outside was hardly remarkable, for not only in the valley wholly uninhabited, but the cliff is so high and beetling that only an aeronaut could study its face in detail. A few steps more, and our breaths were literally snatched from us by what we saw so literally that Thornton, the psychic investigator, actually fainted in the arms of the dazed man who stood behind him. Norris, his plump face utterly white and flabby, simply cried out inarticulately, "What? I think that what I did was to grasp or hiss and cover my eyes." The man behind me, the only one of the party older than I, croaked and hackneyed, "My God," in the most cracked voice I ever heard. Of 7 cultivated men, only Sir William Brinton retained his composure, a thing more to his credit because he led the party and must have seen the sight first. It was a twilit grotto of enormous height, stretching away farther than any eye could see, a subterraneous world of limitless mystery and horrible suggestion. There were buildings and other architectural remains. In one terrified glance, I saw a weird pattern, a tumuli, a savage circle of monoliths, a low domed Roman ruin, a sprawling Saxon pile, and an elderly English edifice of wood. But all these were dwarfed by the ghoulish spectacle presented by the general surface of the ground. For yards about the steppe extended an insane tangle of human bones, or bones at least as human as those on the steps. Like a foamy sea, they stretched, some fallen apart, but others wholly and partly articulated as skeletons. These later invariably, these varied, these later invariably in posture of demonic frenzy, either fighting off some menace or clutching other forms with cannibal intent. When Dr. Trask, the anthropologist, stooped to classify the skulls, he found a degraded mixture which utterly baffled him. They were mostly lower than the Piltdown man in the scale of evolution, but in every case definitely human. Many were higher grade, and a very few were the skulls of supremely and sensitively developed types. All the bones were gnawed mostly by rats, but somewhat by others of the half human drove. Mixed with them were many tiny bones of rats, fallen members of the lethal army which closed the ancient epic. I wonder that any man amongst us lived and kept his sanity through that hideous day of discovery. Not Hoffman, not Huysmans could conceive a scene more wildly incredible, more frenetically repellent, or more gothically grotesque than the twilit grotto through which we 7 staggered, each stumbling on revelation after revelation, and trying to keep from the nonce from thinking of the events which must have taken place there 300 or 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 years ago. It was the antechamber of hell. The poor Thorntons fainted again when Trask told him that some of the skeleton things must have been descended as quadrupeds through the last 20 or more generations. Horror piled on horror as we began to interpret the architectural remains, the quadrupled things, with their occasional recruits from the biped class, had been kept in stone pens, out of which they must have broken in their last delirium of hunger or rat fear. There had been great herds of them, evidently fattened on the coarse vegetables, whose remains could be found in as a sort of poisonous ensilage at the bottom of the huge stone bins older than Rome. I knew now why my ancestors had had such excessive gardens. Would to heaven I could forget. The purpose of the herd I did not have to ask. Sir William, standing with his searchlight in the Roman ruin, translated aloud the most shocking ritual I've ever heard known, and told of the diet of the antediluvian cult, which the priest of Cybele found and mingled with their own. Norries used as he was to the trenches. Could not walk straight when he came out of the English building. It was a butcher's shop and kitchen. He expected that. But it was too much to see familiar English implements in such a place, and to read familiar English graffiti there. Some as recent as 1610. I could not go in that building whose daemon activities were stopped only by the dagger of my ancestor Walter de la Poer. What I did venture to enter was the low Saxon building whose oaken door had fallen, and there I found a terrible row of 10 stone cells with rusty bars. 3 had tenants, all skeletons of high grade, and on the bony forefinger of one I found a seal ring with my own coat of arms. Sir William found a vault with far older cells beyond the Roman chapel, but these cells were empty. Below them was a low crypt with cases of formally arranged bones, some of them bearing terrible parallel inscriptions carved in Latin, Greek, and the tongue of Pharangia. Meanwhile, Dr. Trask had opened one of the prehistoric tumuli, and brought to light skulls which were slightly more human than a gorilla's, and which bore indescribable ideographic carvings. Though all through all this horror, my cat stalked unperturbed. Once I saw him monstrously perched atop a mountain of bones, and wondered at the secrets that might lie behind his yellow eyes. Having grasped to some slight degree the frightful revelation of his twilit area, an area so hideously foreshadowed by my recurrent dream, we turned to that apparently boundless depth of midnight cavern where no ray of light from the cliff could penetrate. We shall never know what slightless Stygian worlds yawn beyond the little distance we went, for it was decided that such secrets are not good for mankind. But there was plenty to engross us close at hand, for we had not gone far before the searchlight shrouded an accursed infinity of pits in which the rats had feasted, and whose sudden lack of replenishment had driven the ravenous rodent army first to turn on the living herds of starving things, and then to burst forth from the priory in that historic orgy of devastation which the peasants will never forget. God, those carry-on black pits of sawed, picked bones and open skulls, those nightmare chasms choked with the Pythagorean, no, Pithcathropoid. Pithcanthropoid. Pithcanthropoid. Pithcanthropoid? I think I'm pronouncing that right. Pithic Pithecanthropoid. Pithecanthropoid, Celtic, Roman, and English bones of countless unhallowed centuries. Some of them were full, and none can say how deep they had once been. Others were still bottomless to our searchlights and people by unnamed fancies. What I thought of the hapless rats that stumbled into such traps amidst the blackness of their quest in that grisly Tartarus. Once my foot slipped near a horribly yawning brink, and I had a moment of ecstatic fear. I must have been musing a long time, for I could not see any of the party but the plump Captain Norries. Then there came a sound from that inky, boundless, farther distant than I thought I knew, and I saw my own black cat dart past me like a winged Egyptian god, straight into the illuminated gulf of the unknown. But I was not far behind, for there was no doubt after another second. It was the eldritch scurrying of those fiend-born rats, always questing for new horrors, and determined to lead me on even unto those grinning caverns of earth's center of the Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep. Nyar. The mad, faceless god howls blindly in the darkness in the piping of two amorphous idiot flute players. My searchlight expired. But still I ran. I heard voices and yowls and echoes, but above all there gently rose that impious, insidious scurrying, gently rising, as a stiff, bloated corpse gently rises above an oily river that floats under endless onyx bridges to a black, putrid sea. Something bumped into me, something soft and plump. It must have been the rats, the vicious, gelatinous, ravenous army that feasts on the dead and the living. Why shouldn't rats eat a Delapoyer, as a Delapoyer eats forbidden things? The war ate my boy, damn them all, and the Yanks ate Carfax with flames and burnt Grandsire Delapore. And the secret, no, I tell you, I am not that. Damon Swineherd in the Twilight Grotto. It was not Edward Norrie's fat face on that flabby fungus thing. Who says I am a Delapoyer? He lived, but my boy died. Shall a Norries hold the lands of a Delapoyer? It's voodoo, I tell you. That spotted snake. Curse you, Thornton. I'll teach you to faint at what my family do. Sblood, thou stinkard, I learn ye how to gust yowled you scare me thornken ways. Magna Mater, at ease, dial, agalabit, ad iodan, agus, bas, dana sort, the orna sort, agas lisa, ungle, rugh. That is what they say, I said, when they found me in the blackness after 3 hours. Found me crouching in the blackness over the plump, half-eaten body of Captain Norries, with my own cat leaping and tearing at my throat. Now they have blown up Exham Priory, taken my cat away from me, and shut me into this barred room in Hanwell with fearful whispers about my heredity and experiences. Thornton is in the next room, but they prevent me from talking to him. They are trying to, but to suppress most of the facts concerning the Priory. When I speak of poor Norries, they accuse me of a hideous thing. But they must know that I did not do it. They must know it was the rats, the slithering, scurrying rats whose scampering will never let me sleep. The daemon rats that race behind the padding in the room and beckon me down to the greater horrors than I have ever known. The rats, they can never hear. The rats, the rats in the walls. And that concludes today's reading of The Rats in the Walls. Stay tuned for next time's reading, The Festival. Hope to see you all next time. If you're watching from YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe down below. If you want to watch these live, I do them on Twitch, twitch.tv/stigmaxoxo. So make sure you go follow that. Hit the notification button. It'll let you know when I'm going to be going live. Ring a ding ding ding. Yeah, if you want to check out some more videos, also there should be some boxes that are going to be popping up on either side, over here and over here and over here and over here. There's the Grimm's fairy tales, which should be on this side, and then the tales of horror on this side. So go check those out. There's a lot of really cool stories up there. Yeah, I think that's about it. We're gonna be coming back for some more stories tomorrow, so make sure you keep on tuning in. I'm gonna keep on uploading some of the VODs. I know I'm a little bit behind on some of those, but I swear I'm gonna have most of them up by tonight. So you guys can get caught up on that for tomorrow, okay? I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Damn, it's already 11:30 over here. Holy shit. I hope you have a wonderful night. Don't let the bed bugs bite or the rats in the wall. And don't stay a stranger. Later. Till the next reading. The tales of horror.